Hey, it's Josh with MapEffects, and today I want to talk to you about how to color your dungeon maps. I know it's one of those subjects that feels really overwhelming and intimidating. I know that I felt that way for a long time, but I'm going to show you a couple of tricks on how to use the color palettes that are included in the Dungeon Map Builder to use that as your foundation, and then a couple of tricks on how to make your palette feel more cohesive like this. So let's start mapping. So let's start by bringing in one of our color palettes that are included in the Dungeon Map Builder. And to do that, I'm going to come up here and Procreate to this wrench icon, select Canvas, and then I'm going to turn on the reference image. And actually I already have it loaded in here. But the nice thing about this is you can actually have this reference image up and it doesn't affect the number of layers that you're limited to on your canvas. And you can also pick colors by holding down on the colors to switch in between. So it's just kind of nice to have this off to the side. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select this outside background color, come up to the layer panel and create a new layer above our paper texture, and just click and drag that in there. I'm going to come back and create another layer above that and select the wall color. Come back to my brushes, and I'm going to make sure that I have this Cartographer ink brush selected. You can find it in the brushes and patterns folder. And this is the primary brush that we're going to be using throughout this whole tutorial to just block in our colors. So I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see a bit better. So we're just going to start coloring in these walls. And with this style of wall, if you zoom in, you may notice that there's broken lines on the backs of these stones, which means that you can't just click and drag the color into this wall to fill it up because all of this is connected. And the reason that I did that is that it blends a little bit better with the outside wall so that it looks like it's embedded into the ground rather than being a freestanding wall like you would have like here. But it does mean that you have to color it by hand. So just put on a good audiobook, podcast, or some music, and just have some fun doing some good old school coloring. It's honestly a bit relaxing. So I'm just going to speed this up for you, and we'll move on to the next step. We're almost there. All right, now that we have that done, we can come and select our floor color here. And we're going to create another layer. This time it'll be above our background layer, but below our line art, our wall color layer. And then this one is a little bit easier to block in because we're going to be painting under the walls. So you just kind of have to fill in this general area, so it's a little bit faster. And at this point, it's okay to be filling in all of the items because we're going to be painting the color for those on a layer above the floor layer. So you don't have to go around all of these outlines, you can just kind of fill in this whole area. And now I'm going to actually turn this palette off. It's still there, so if you wanted to come back in here and turn it back on, it'll pop right back up, but we're just going to hide it for now so we can see a little bit better and it's not in our screen. So now that we have our main color palette down, we can start picking colors that are kind of based on this main color palette. So everything is going to be a little bit cooler, a little bit more blue in color because of the palette that we've chosen. If we had more of a brown color palette, you would want to use a little bit more brown hues, reds and oranges and things like that. But since we're using this color, we're going to be using a little bit more desaturated blue colors. And you'll find when it comes to looking at your color palette that generally these colors that are a little bit more in the gray desaturated area will play better with one another, and you can kind of get away with a little bit more if you stay over here. As soon as you move over here, it's almost like the color is shouting at you. It's demanding attention. And if all of your colors are over here, your eye doesn't really know what to look at. So generally it's best to stay somewhere over here. And you can obviously slide this around to the different hues and colors and stuff that you need. But if you stay over here, you can pick a little bit more desaturated gray colors. And then if you want to put emphasis on a particular item, like this pile of gold or something here, you can then make that, if we shifted this more over to the oranges, you can make that a little bit more saturated. But we'll get into that as we start picking the colors. So the first thing that I think we're going to pick is maybe a wood color, since there's a couple of boxes and stuff that we want to color in here. So I just picked the background as just kind of a base, and now I'm going to shift it over here into the oranges. And let's just start with that, and I'll show you a trick if we need to change it. So again, we're on our own layer, and we're just going to block in this color real quick. And I can already tell that's a little bit too similar, but that's all right. Show you how we're going to fix it. It actually looks pretty good. But one trick that you can do if you want to make sure that you have good contrast in the colors that you're picking is you can create a layer here on the top, and you're going to switch the color to black or white and just fill in the whole canvas. And then you're going to come back to this layer and select the blend modes, and we're going to switch it to saturation. So basically what this ends up doing is it completely sucks all the saturation out of your piece, so that you can see if you have good contrast between the items. And I can already see we're not so distracted by color now, that this color is a bit too similar to this color here, so it's getting lost. We don't actually have good value contrast. So let's come back here, and I'm going to select this color, and let's darken it, actually. Let's darken it a bit. And the quick way to recolor this now is because this is the only item that's colored on here, is we're going to tap on the layer and select Alpha Lock. So now you can only paint on pixels that have already been painted on this layer. So what that means is I can take this color that I just added, and I can just paint right over that, and it only colored on this box. So now I can switch this back on, or turn the saturation off basically, and you can see, okay, so now there's a little bit more contrast between the box and the floor. So I would say that this is a good contrast level to at least have with the value, which is kind of contrast between light and dark is what that means. So let's turn the Alpha Lock off now, and we can start painting some of the other items that are in our room. So since there's a few wood items in the room, like the trapdoor and the chest and stuff, just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to, let's turn this brush size down a little bit more. We're just going to use this same color. If you wanted to add some subtle variations between the colors of the wood, you absolutely can do that. But again, just for the sake of simplicity in this particular tutorial, we're just gonna use this same brown. Color in that. The wood on the handle of this broken spear. We're gonna color in the weapons rack. And I'm actually just gonna fill in this whole thing instead of trying to draw around each one of these swords or axes that is sitting in this weapons rack, you can just fill in the whole thing and then come back later and recolor those items in. Just makes it a little bit faster. We're going to do the same thing over here with the bookshelf. Just going to fill that in. Doesn't have to be perfect. Actually, let's do a kind of a brown hilt on this sword. Actually, you know what I did? See how this isn't coloring on this? It's because this layer is below the wall. It can actually be above, now that I think about it. So. And, oh, you know what? We need to color in these doors. I have these as wood doors. Okay, it's looking pretty good. And again, if we wanted to adjust this a little bit, we can turn on the alpha lock and, you know, we'll just throw whatever color and we could just fill the layer, and you can see now it's changed the color on all of the items on that layer. So just kind of a nice feature to have. Let's come back in here, turn alpha lock off, or it won't allow you to paint anything else. And we're just going to, we'll use this brown kind of as a base color. And we want maybe a lighter brown. Let's make it a little bit more yellow. We'll bring the color up a bit. And just to test it out, I'm going to create a new layer above that. Just paint this in, see what this looks like. It's looking pretty good. Might be a little too bright. I guess it depends on how much attention you want to draw to it, but let's leave it for now. And then we can say that this piece of paper over here is probably a similar color to that bag. And we could say the horn is probably a similar color, but let's make it a little bit different. Let's desaturate it a little bit and brighten it up just a bit. Yeah, it's looking good. Okay, let's actually take that same color that we used for the horn. We'll paint in these books. And I think every dungeon needs a bookshelf, right? Of course, in my opinion, I think every room probably needs a bookcase or something like that of some kind. Okay, so now let's pick a kind of a metal, like a dark metal color to do this door and some of the metal strapping that would be on this treasure chest. So I'm just going to come back to this brown. Let's shift this all the way into the blues though. The metal would probably, it tends to be a little bit more in the blue hue anyway, but especially because it would be influenced by the color of this room, we're going to shift it down here. And let's just see what this looks like. I'm going to merge this layer down from the previous step, create a new one above it. And let's start coloring in this metal door. See how this looks. Okay, I feel like that looks pretty good. Let's check it though, right? Yeah, there's good contrast. See, everything's starting to read pretty clearly in black and white. And that's just helpful if you're getting a little bit too distracted with the colors. One of those tricks that you can use if you're using digital tools that makes things a little bit easier. You could also do that if you're using traditional tools. If you took a picture of your canvas and then just edited the photo to remove all the saturation, you would get a little bit of a similar idea to the type of contrast you're getting with your values. We can paint this. Handle on the trapdoor. Let's also paint the spearhead. this same color. And it's kind of nice to incorporate the same color in a few different places in the room. It just helps everything to feel a bit more cohesive. Okay. All right, so now let's tackle this pile of gold that's over here. So I'm going to use this as kind of my foundation. And let's shift this a little bit more yellow. We'll brighten it a little bit, but we're going to increase the saturation a decent amount. And let's see how this looks. Let's merge this down. New layer. You'll notice as I work that I like to create a lot of new kind of temporary layers. And the reason is that it kind of gives you some creative freedom to try some things before you commit to anything. I think that it helps you to maybe make some more bold decisions or try things that you were maybe afraid to do if it would affect or potentially quote unquote ruin how your map is looking. It gives you a little bit of boldness to try some things. Color in these coins. Don't have to be totally perfect. And color in this cup. And I feel like that's more like a pearl necklace, so let's leave that alone. Okay. It's looking pretty good. So I suppose while we're here, let's color in this necklace. Again, I'm going to say that since it would be, pearls are, kind of a whitish beige, they're going to be more affected by the ambient light from the rest of the ambient color from the rest of the room. So we're going to say that it's a little bit more blue. Desaturate it. Maybe bump it up a little bit. Let's see what this looks like. Actually, I think I'm going to have to make this brush smaller. There we go. Since there's some kind of little jewels in here, let's color these too. And if you want to mix these up and make some of these blue like sapphires or had some emeralds or rubies or things like that in here, you definitely could do that as well. But we're just going to keep it straightforward. There we go. Okay, and I'm actually going to pull this orange color, brighten it just a little bit, make it a little bit more saturated. We're going to use it for our torch over here, add our flame in here. And if you want to see how to kind of add like torch glow in the room, firelight, be sure to check out my other tutorial that I recently posted on that. Okay, and I realized that I forgot to color in the door handles over here. This is inevitably what always happens, is you think you're done and then you see something that you missed. And actually, let's use the same color for this tripwire that's set right here in front of our hidden trapdoor. And we can use this brown color again for our rope. And if you did want to add, again, some like subtle variation in here, we can just turn on the alpha lock again. Darken this if we wanted to, and then just paint over this. So even if you kind of block in the color one way, just turn the alpha lock on again, and then you can just kind of adjust it. So then if you wanted to add some subtle variation between the different wood surfaces here, say you wanted to, just slightly lighten up these doors we can just come in here, turn on alpha lock. We'll bring up the color just a little bit and redo these. Simple. Okay, we're looking pretty good. So let's come over here and we'll color this rug. Let's make it a little bit more purple in color. And try this, see how this looks. Yeah, that's interesting. Trying to decide how I feel about that. It's a little bit too similar to the wood on this door. Let's turn this off. Let's push it back a little bit more into the blues. Let's brighten it up a little bit. Did I turn alpha lock on? No, I did not. Okay. Yeah, I'm not liking that either. You know what? Let's try something else. Let's come over here. Let's just make it a brown, like a lighter brown. Maybe even looks like a bit of a blanket, something like that. I feel like I'm liking that better. I think the purple was just demanding too much attention and I wasn't liking how that was looking. So, like I said, trial and error. Just try different things, keep it on its own layer. I'm not going to edit that out because I think it's a really good example of how you can just have fun playing and trying different things and see what works, you know? So let's color in the suit of armor. I'm going to keep it fairly gray, but I want it lighter than the floor, I think, so that it stands out well. Let's use that same color to do the swords in the weapon rack. Oh, just realized I forgot color in this torch. I think there's a candle on the table that I forgot to color too. Like I said, there's always something. I always forget about something. We can also come over here, do the shield. What color should we make the dragon? Who doesn't like a red dragon, right? It's very classic. Maybe it's too predictable though, right? That's all right. Let's not overthink it. Let's come in here. Shift our hue all the way to the reds. I think I'm gonna make sure that it's a little bit darker in value from the shield. And we don't want to go too crazy. We don't want it to stand out too awful much, but see what this looks like. Red is one of those colors that you kind of need to be careful with, especially if you're kind of doing an environment like this that has predominantly cool colors. Red tends to really draw the eye more than most others. So if you make it too saturated, it'll just look unnaturally bright. So try to use a little bit more of a grayed off red, desaturated red for something like this to still make it pop, but it's not necessarily the subject of this map. Okay, let's back up. And you'll notice that I like to just really zoom out, and it just helps you to kind of take in the whole map and see what's standing out, what looks good. If something is standing out too much, you can tone it back a bit. So it's just helpful to move back and forth. I'm going to color in the fire on here. I'm going to actually fill in this whole thing because the fire would probably be casting some pretty strong orange color in that whole area. We can color in this. Let's use this horn color as the base for our candle, but we're going to brighten it up, desaturate it a bit, see what that looks like. It's looking pretty good. Let's pick a color for, you know what? Let's use our orange as a base for this here, but let's darken it just a little bit, desaturate it. Let's see what this looks like. I'm gonna put it on its own layer. Something tells me I might have to take a couple of stabs at this before I get it right, but maybe not. This is looking pretty good. Just kind of thinking it's maybe a little bit more copper, a little bit more bronze in color. Let's come back here, turn on our saturation layer that we've got here on the top. And yeah, I feel like everything's looking pretty good, standing out, has good contrast overall, the things that I want them to. So let's turn this off. And since this is right now the same color as the floor, let's actually color it the same color as the wall, so that it's different, but everything is kind of stone, so you don't want it too different. All right, so now that we kind of have all the main colors blocked in, I'm going to show you a trick that I like to use, especially if you're a little unsure of the colors themselves that you've picked. You know, your contrast between everything looks pretty good, but the colors and the amount of saturation, you're just a little unsure of it. So let's merge all of these down so that they're all on the same layer. And I'm going to create a new layer above that. And I'm going to let's pick the wall color. And we're just going to click and drag and fill up the whole layer. And then we'll come back to our layer panel and select clipping mask. So now you can see that it is only coloring where we colored our previous items, but all the colors are still there, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to come up to our blend mode and we're going to scroll down, change it to color. So now this color is strongly influencing all the colors that are picked in here, but you can see that our values have still been retained. You can still see how we kind of colored these in to have good contrast in our values, but they're all now this bluish color. So now what we're going to do is come in here and we're going to adjust the opacity. So again, the ambient color of the room, or the ambient light in the room, is going to be reflecting off of all the different surfaces, which are predominantly this bluish colored stone, which is going to be having an effect on all the other colors in the room. So if we have this color layer here, we can introduce some of this bluish color to all of our colors, and you just kind of want to back it out and, you know, just kind of eyeball it. You know, just slide it back and forth until you get something that you're happy with. Kind of zone in, maybe something like this. Maybe pull it back a little bit. See what that looks like. Subtle, but you can see we've introduced a little bit of that bluish desaturation to all of the colors in the dungeon, and you know, you can bring this up a little bit if you want it stronger. I'm not sure how much the camera is picking up on this, but you can kind of see the difference. And now it's kind of just a little trick to make all the colors that you've picked on your map feel a little bit more cohesive. Everything is tied together now because of that blue color layer that we've added in. So that's pretty much how you block in all your colors. And then if we wanted to, just to add some interest to this, we can duplicate our paper layer that we have completely hidden back here. And let's just bring it up to the top. We'll zoom out. And we'll come up here to our adjustments layer. Let's turn the saturation of this completely down. We can brighten this just a little bit, just so it doesn't darken the map too much. And then we can switch the blend mode to multiply, or a linear burn is actually pretty nice because it tends to make the colors pop a little bit more. Sometimes multiply looks a little bit too flat, a little bit too desaturated, so I'll switch in between the two of them to see what looks best, but we'll switch to this linear burn, and then we'll turn down the opacity until we can kind of dial in something that we like. And it looks like it's about half opacity. But you can see that it really starts giving some texture and then some natural variance to the different colors and stuff that we have on the map because of that paper texture that we added in. So when you have this as your foundation, you have all the colors and stuff set that you need. Then when you go to add highlights and shading or the torchlight like I was mentioning before, this is your good base so that you have good contrast between all your colors. It really stands out, it really pops. So then when you add shading and stuff, you're building on a good solid foundation. If you want to pick up the Dungeon Map Builder for not only the color palette, but all of the 400 hand-drawn items that are included so that you can quickly put together a little dungeon map like this, just be sure to visit the MapEffects shop, and I look forward to seeing your map.